Coach, some have argued that Georgia showed the blueprint on how to slow the offense down. Do you see any of that, or do you think, hey, you got to have the athletes Georgia has to run what they do?
What's the question?
Did Georgia show the blueprint to slow your offense down, or do you discard that and say you have to have Georgia's athletes to slow down the offense?
Gotcha. Okay. Blueprint to slow us down. I think what slowed us down on Saturday was us. Pre-snap penalties, not executing in critical times in the red zone. Again, going back to the pre-snap penalties. But in terms of a blueprint, man, I think they got really good players. I think there's a lot of teams in this league that have really good players. We've played really good players. They played better than us on Saturday. The environment was at times not handled well by us, both players and coaches. That's on the coaches in terms of not being ready in that aspect. But I'm not sure. I mean, they lined up with 11 guys, and they covered our guys at times. At times they didn't. We executed at times. At times we didn't. The key part of that was in critical situations in situational football, third down. As we got tighter in the red zone, we didn't execute. I think it's a game of execution, and we did not. They do have good athletes, though. You're right.
Coach, if you will, reflect on the seniors on your side of the ball who've helped make such a difference over the last couple of years in this program.
Man, the seniors here right now are leading in such an incredible way. You know, we just got done with a Tuesday practice after our first loss, and it's constant energy, constant positivity. I think they fed off of Coach Hype in that regard. But guys like Hendon Hooker, Jerome Carvin, said, like, those guys are the reason this program, at least for us offensively, has been able to flip. They've fed off of Coach Hype's message. They fed off of our message. They've demanded greatness through the offseason, demanded greatness through practice. I think they continue to demand that our process every single day is right. But those guys have been incredible. They've just remained positive and remained the same way throughout the process. I think very much led by Hendon and what his approach has been. I can't give those guys enough credit.
I know you don't want to rehash all the things of the Georgia game, but one question in terms of offense and the flow. It seemed like every drive had injuries, penalties. How much does that affect you guys from a rhythm standpoint with tempo when there's those – every drive had multiple stoppages of play in that drive? How much did you think that affect kind of the early rhythm in the game?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways when there's a clock stoppage, it affects momentum one way or the other in any offense. I think when it's self-inflicted, when there's 5 yards that come with it, I think it's really hard because you're playing, instead of 3rd and 1, now you're playing 3rd and 6. Instead of 3rd and 6, you're playing 3rd and 11. I think those situations are hard. It also allows them to sub in some guys that, man, like you'd rather not play against those guys in a situation where you have to throw the football. I think that's where it hurts you more than the actual clock stopping. When it's because of an injury, injuries happen. Sometimes injuries happen a little bit more against certain teams, and so be it. But when it's self-inflicted with false starts, I think that's where if you're losing sleep, that's where I lose sleep. A defensive guy gets hurt, man, that's unfortunate. Hopefully he's healthy. But when it's us self-inflicting that wound, that's the part that I think we own as coaches. I own myself. That, man, like now we're putting ourselves in a bad spot because the clock is stopping. They can sub fresh bodies out there, and now you're 3rd and 1. We've been highly effective this year. 3rd and 6, then 3rd and 11, then 3rd and 16. Man, it's really, really hard, especially in a game where you're trying to catch up. I think it makes it really hard.
You got 3 games left, but the transfer portal window will come open in a few weeks. How much does the staff have to go ahead and start like having those internal discussions, like what do we need? and start kind of pinpointing positions of need, especially like for an offensive coordinator like yourself or a defensive coordinator like Coach Banks? How much do you go ahead and start thinking about, okay, going forward, we're going to need, 2 tight ends next year or whatever?
Yeah, we've been having those conversations since week one, really since camp. We do have more than 3 games left, but I do know what you mean. That's true, and you cover recruiting, so I get it. But no, you do. You've gotta have a plan like back in August of, man, this is who we think we're going to lose. The COVID year kind of jacks it up a little bit too, because you don't really know exactly who's going to be back in terms of guys that have another year. But the NFL draft is in that same breath. Right now, sitting here with at least who you are thinking will be back, where you have holes you got to fill. Those have been pinpointed since August and talked about every week. We talk about recruiting every day, but they have been talked about in depth as a full staff several times a week, every week. I mean, you know this. It's the lifeblood of what we do. You got to have players. But we've pinpointed positions where we feel like, man, we need an older guy. We need a younger guy with some years. Man, can that be fixed with a high school guy that can take some time to develop? Or, no, we need immediate help there. And you could look at the roster and say, man, like, they're really old there. They need some young help, or spots where we feel like we have really good young players that'll be able to step in and replace bodies.
Alex, the bar has been so high on how well Hendon Hooker has played this year, and some commented that maybe he held on to the ball too much in the pocket. He was asked about that yesterday. He didn't think so. How did you view that aspect of the game, the way Hendon handled that? I'm sure situational also.
Yeah, I thought Hendon, just like he has every week, has really done a phenomenal job of doing his job. I think obviously the quarterback will own some of the sacks. The quarterback will own maybe some of the missed throws. It really is, not to sound cliche about it, but it really is everybody's job to protect the quarterback. And we talk about it every week. We talked about it again on Monday. Like, it's all of our job to protect the quarterback. The receivers got to get open. Tight ends got to get open. O-line, running backs, tight ends at times have got to protect. And the scheme has to help them guys get open too. So it's just as much on us. In terms of him holding on to the ball too long, I don't believe that to be the case. Where Hendon has been exceptional is his timing, his ball placement, his reads have been impeccable throughout the year. Now, you take the environment, you take the fact that you're playing a really good football team on the road. Did we handle that the best way we could in terms of in those situations where it's third down? A lot of those are clock stoppage, and are we handling it the right way? That's where our process for us has to be right in terms of how we prepare our guys, and how for all of those guys, in a lot of ways, it's not an excuse, it's just reality. First time in that situation as the number one team in the country, right? So in terms of him holding on to the ball too long, I would say no. It's all of our job to protect him. He could have played better. We could have played better. We could have coached better. We've learned, we've moved on, and not discounting what it was. We're on to Missouri, a really, really good defense again, and we got to go and continue to prepare and continue to perfect our process. I think that's what's awesome about this game is you get one shot at 60 minutes to do it. We didn't do it. It's not Hendon's fault, and it'd be really hard to pinpoint one guy here and there. We didn't execute. We jumped off sides. We didn't execute in the red zone, and it wasn't good enough. And so I think everybody understands that. Our players understand that. How they respond is everything in terms of us continue to build this program where it's got to go. And as of 3 days into it, they've responded at a really, really good level.
So kind of along those lines, I'll follow up to Jimmy's blueprint question. If you compare how teams schematically have defended you, would you say Georgia was at least within that range? Like it wasn't well outside of the norm that they did things schematically that just you guys had not seen at all this year, last year?
Yeah. Again, I'm not trying to discount the question. They have 11 guys. They can only do so many different things. I do, like, if the question is, man, did they out-scheme us and we had no idea what was going on? Absolutely not. They had a really good scheme. They played really well. We have a really good scheme. We did not play well. Again, schematically, we were sound. We were behind the chains because of the pre-snap penalties the entire night. So, blueprint, yes. If the blueprint for those guys, really good players, really good coaches. Awesome. We have really good players, really good coaches. On that day, in that 60 minutes, they were better than us. We screwed up a bunch with the pre-snap penalties.
Alex, you guys didn't have Cedric for 4 games, continued to play at a really high level. He comes back. How do you feel like he's played, and how do you feel like the offense has sort of worked him back into things over the past 2 games?
Yeah, I think Ced's done a really good job. We were really careful bringing him back 2 weeks ago. He played the entire game against Georgia. Ramel spelled him there a little bit. I think he's done a really good job. He's looks like his old self, maybe fresh legs a little bit in some ways. But he's continued to press it to improve every single day. Really, really good to have him. I think, you saw him on Saturday. He made some plays that were hard to make. The guy that was covering him is as good as one as we've seen all year. A lot of credit to that kid. But I thought Ced won his share of battles in that one. I think he's going to continue to win his share of battles. I think he's knocked the rust off. Man, it's really good to have him. I really think with him and Brew and Ramel being able to rotate and squirrel, I think we're continuing to build depth there. You hope to continue to be able to play more guys, but really proud of Ced. Thank you. Thank you, guys.